Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this week we are once again diving into Joe on Joe Illustrated territory as we cover the hijinks of G.I. Joe issue number 64. Last week we covered 63, where Snake Eyes, the Blind Master, and Scarlet found themselves blowed up real good by a mine in Grenada, let's call the whole thing off. This month picks up, and it by the way, it cliffhangered with Fred 7 leaving from Galveston in a boat on his way to Cobra Island. So this month picks up right where the action is. And before we start into that action, we're going to hear a little word from our sponsor. Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show. That's right, guys. Listen to Movies and a Meal. And while you're on the internet, adding Movies and a Meal podcast to your podcast catcher, you need to go on to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and you need to add at Joe on Joe Pod and follow me and let me know what you think of the show. Send me a note, send me a hello, send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Leave a review on your podcatcher. If you're on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this, leave a review. Let me know what you think of the show. I always love hearing it because it's great to know that you guys are out there listening. And 2, it always helps the algorithms. So the more people leave reviews, even if it's just a star rating, wherever you're at, then these podcatchers, they tend to promote it more. And so more people hear about the show, and the show grows, and we spread the love of G.I. Joe. And we know G.I. Joe is super spreading these days because all you guys trying to catch Vipers and Firefly at Target, you guys know it is in demand. G.I. Joe is flying off the shelf. It is due for a renaissance. So we are here for you. Before we start digging into G.I. Joe number 64, we're going to start with our favorite segment.
You were saying?
Thanks, Stalker. Now, we're going to look at books that were on the shelf during, in this case, October of 87. And other comic books, this time by the publisher. It's a little-known publisher, Marvel Comics. You guys are familiar with them? Yeah, so G.I. Joe. October 87. They call it again. Oh God, I feel like I don't want to say this every show. They call it the cover date. It's actually the take it off shelves date. But as time passes, that's what everyone's doing. The biggest thing on the shelves during the month that this book hit the stands is in the Spider-Man books, without a doubt. It's Kraven's Last Hunt. It starts in, I believe, Web is the first one. Web of Spider-Man is the first issue of Kraven's Last Hunt. And then it goes to Spectacular, and then I believe Amazing. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, Web 31, then Amazing Spider-Man number 293. That's part 2. Then it goes to Spectacular Spider-Man number 131. That's part 3 of Kraven's Last Hunt. It's a 6-part story. It follows in that order in the next month as well. If you've never read Kraven's Last Hunt, do yourself a favor, get it. It's available anywhere you get your books. It's been collected a billion times. It's one of my early real Spider-Man stories that I read like as a whole arc. It's dark, it's depressing, and it's wonderful. And it's also drawn by G.I. Joe stalwart Mike Zeck. And if you're not familiar with it, the top notes are Spider-Man is getting stalked by Kraven the Hunter, his longtime enemy, who is, a bit of a joke, always been a bit of a joke. But Kraven basically goes insane. For real. And he stalks Spider-Man and he supplants him. And that's all I'm going to say for you no spoiler people out there. But it's told fabulously. Absolutely fabulously. There's subplots and there's just wonderful, wonderful images by Mike Zeck. If you've never read Kraven's Last Hunt, do that right now. When you're done listening to this podcast and when you're done following me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, when you're done sending me an email, and when you're done reviewing Joe on Joe Pod, then go to Comixology and get it digitally, or go to your local. I prefer you to go to your local comic book shop and pick up a copy of Kraven's Last Hunt, because it is fabulous. Also this month on Heathcliff 19, Heathcliff standing on a scale. Turns out Heathcliff fat. Who knew? Heathcliff, you're getting fat. Wolverine and Sabretooth go at it in X-Men 222. And this book actually was really good. And I think it's technically their second Wolverine Sabretooth fight. It's a follow-up to the Mutant Massacre fight. It's probably worth about $20 in the back issue market these days. That's what we sell it for, $15 or $20, I believe. You probably could find one around 10 or 15 if you looked hard enough. But it's great. It's a solid issue, and it's drawn by Mark Silvestri in his early X-Men years, when his pencils were really tight and just energetic and powerful and wonderful. So that's it, man. Those are strong books for Marvel Comics. Now DC Comics.
You were saying?
Art Adams does the cover for Action Comics Annual #1. Now this is Action after the reboot, so it's Annual 1 after the book's been around for 50 years. But it's an awesome Art Adams cover. I love seeing Art Adams art. And he's drawing Batman and Superman, and I think they fight a vampire in it, if memory serves, and if the cover is not lying to me. Interestingly, I was excited, but in Action 593, this is the second part of a Superman, Fourth World, John Byrne, Kirby homage crossover. It's got Superman making out with Big Barda, and I believe this is that Byrne did this a couple times. He did it with Big Barda. He did it with She-Hulk, where like he had these third-party people either mesmerize them, in this case, into falling in love with Superman, or like also getting like nude pictures and publishing them in Playboy and things like that. There was always this level of like going back to that well that John Byrne did a few times in the 80s. That was always a little like, really? All right, we're doing it. But you get to see Byrne draw the Fourth World characters, which, Kirby was a big influence on his stuff, and it looks great. Like his rendition of Miracle and Barda are fantastic, and obviously I love his Superman. So it's a fun little two-parter. Doom Patrol Volume 2 #1 is on the stands. So if you guys have seen the Doom Patrol TV show, that's I believe it's currently on HBO Max, but originally it was on the DC streaming app. Friend of the show, Phil Morris, you guys, he was a guest on Joe. He's on the Doom Patrol TV show. He played Vic Stone's father in that. The show is great. The show takes place in this series continuity. And so this series ran, it was a little more traditional superhero-y. And it ran for it was 18 or 19 issues with this lineup of like Robot Man and Negative Man and Celsius, I think, and then and they wore the red and black costumes, which I thought looked pretty good. But it only ran that way, and it had a little bit of Eric Larson art in it at some point. I believe this first one it's got a Steve Lytle cover, and I think he did interiors too. It only ran about 18 issues in this version, but they never rebooted it. They just brought in Grant Morrison, and I believe it was issue 19 that Grant Morrison said, yeah, we're just going to go crazy with it. Very much like Alan Moore did with Swamp Thing a couple years earlier, where he said, yeah, we're already in the middle of a run of Swamp Thing. We're just going to restart it. I don't know where you guys stand on this. Personally, I love that they honor the book more than the creative change. So they could have, nowadays, absolutely, they would have restarted it with the Doom Patrol #1 when Grant Morrison came on, and it just would have had to stand on its own. I adore that in issue 19, it just starts being a different book. Creative changes. And within that, they try to integrate them as much as possible, but really it's just a brand new different book. I love it because it makes it easier to follow if you're a reader. It gives you like these really peculiar starting points for things that make the hobby more interesting. It's how you get X-Men 137 being, the death of Jean Grey, not like 150 or 125 or 100, all that kind of stuff. And in this case, that's the case with this Doom Patrol run. It's fun. I've got all these issues. There's kind of standard superhero stuff. Doom Patrol's pretty cool. A bunch of weirdos fighting the world. But then Morrison comes in and just like does acid and tells it in a really wildly different way, which those books are great. And I like those too. But this is the start of it. Issue 1's on the stand as G.I. Joe 64 also hit the stand. So that's cool. Legion of Superheroes Annual 5. This is, I believe the story's called The Promise. I'm going to click on this and see if I find out. Doing it live. We're going to do it live. I was wrong. But it's called Child of Darkness, Child of Light. But what it is about is that during the Great Darkness saga, Darkseid kidnapped one of Imra's children and turned him into Validus, their telepathic lightning throwing monster enemy. And this is the payoff to that. I think The Promise was the story where we see that happening, because when Darkseid left during the Great Darkness saga, he made like, I promise I'll be back. And I think The Promise was the name of her giving birth. And like the lights went out and all of a sudden they were like, we thought there were 2 kids, but there's only one, because remember Garth, Winathians have twins. And so they would expect twins to happen, but there was only one, Graham and Garridan, I want to say. And then I believe, if memory serves, this is the issue that they kind of told the full story that, yeah, Darkseid kidnapped their child at birth without them knowing it. And here you go. They've been fighting Validus is their own child all this years. Either way, it's awesome. And then they followed up with it in the 5 years later Legion. Fabulous. I love it. Love it. It's a storyline that I think never really got its final due, because then the kid just stayed young forever. And they said he had the Validus disease, but they never really followed up on it. I would have loved to have seen Validus like hit that version of it, make a comeback, because they brought Validus back. I'm getting into deep Legion talk here. I apologize. But they brought Validus back, but they never really they rebooted it and never really addressed that it was supposed to be their kid, and so on and so forth. Anywhoots. Watchmen #12. That is a huge book. It is the culmination of Watchmen. Obviously, everyone listening must know how great Watchmen is. And this is the final issue of Watchmen. Also this month, it's Wonder Woman #9, which was a big Cheetah issue. And that ties in with this month on HBO Max, the new Wonder Woman 84 movie, which if you haven't seen it yet, count yourself lucky. I'm not going to spend time bashing it. I'm just going to say there's a lot of problems with that movie. I'm shocked that they made that movie, because the first Wonder Woman was amazing. And this seemed to say everything you loved about that first movie. Let's get rid of it. Let's make a completely different movie about other people and not give Wonder Woman anything to do, and have a whole bunch of plot problems that are not just handily waved away with a wish. And let's make a sequel to Wishmaster. Anyway, that's for another podcast. But this Wonder Woman 9, this is a George Perez, his take on Cheetah, and it's pretty good. It's a good starting point if you want to look at like what the modern day Cheetah kind of stems from. This Wonder Woman 9 is really, really good place to do that. So that's DC Comics.
You were saying?
And now we're going to take a look at the movie theater and see what was in theaters in October of '87. Let's see. Oh, Like Father, Like Son. That's a body switch movie. Speaking of Wonder Woman and body switching, that's with Dudley Moore and Kirk Cameron. Dudley Moore, rest in peace. Kirk Cameron, I wish you were resting in peace. Terrible. It was charming. It was a charming body swap movie that was big in the 80s. Okay. But the big deal is on October 9th, it's The Princess Bride. Fabulous movie. And, obviously a modern day fairy tale, things so on and so forth. But also on this day, 3 O'Clock High. Never seen it? You're missing out. I haven't seen it in a long time. But it's got Casey Siemaszko, and he gets in trouble with the bully, who I believe is Richard Tyson. And the bully's like, I'm going to beat your ass at 3 o'clock. And so he has to go through. So it's like the day is clicking down to 3 o'clock high. It's like high noon, like that kind of a thing, where at come 3 o'clock, he's going to get his butt beat, and the whole school knows it. And it's awesome. If you've never seen 3 o'clock high, please seek it out. It's such a charming, charming movie. Yeah. Oh, Paul Feig's in it. Yardley Smith. I remember Yardley Smith being in it. She's of course the voice of Bart Simpson. Mitch Pileggi from X-Files. That's fun. Jeffrey Tambor, Philip Baker Hall. Yeah, it's a really 3 o'clock high is a good movie. On October 16th, Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2. It's related to because it's around prom night, but it's like kind of unrelated to the first prom night. If you've ever seen the first one with Jamie Lee Curtis, Prom Night 2 is fun. Like it's really fun. It's like the ghost of someone who died in the 50s, and she comes back and gets her revenge. It's not a terrible movie. It's actually pretty fun. On October 23rd, the great Paul Newman in Glass Menagerie. I actually don't think I've ever seen this one. I love Paul Newman. But he's in it with Joanne Woodward, John Malkovich, Karen Allen. I mean, that's got to be amazing. And it's Tennessee Williams, written by Tennessee Williams. And of course, ever seen Cat on the Hot Tin Roof? Paul Newman's fabulous when he's chewing Tennessee Williams dialogue. So I need to see Glass Menagerie. And at the end of the month, this is kind of a big one, but a little not necessarily for like the younger set at the time, but Baby Boom. With Diane Keaton, about like a middle-aged woman, who she have it all, and she decides, she gets a baby, and like, how is she going to juggle it all? And this was one. I think it's a charming movie. I've seen it. I don't remember hating it. It was huge. It was a huge movie because it was like this, like groundbreaking, like, women can have it all, or we can. This watershed moment where then this movie became shorthand in popular discussion about, like, can a woman have a career and a baby and juggle everything? And this really became the Kleenex of movies for that. It's good. So yeah, Baby Boom came out October 30th. It doesn't really tie in with G.I. Joe, but it was out there, guys. So let's dig into G.I. Joe number 64.
What we've got here is a game of dirty pool with a capital D for Destro.
Great cover by Ron Wagner. I don't love it. Just because it's very static. I think my issue with the cover is static, but it looks great. Like the execution of it is solid. I think you're getting good emotion. You're getting good anger from Serpentor. You're getting good, like, disbelief, shock from Baroness. It's the one where Baroness and Serpentor are on either side of Cobra Commander's face, but it's Fred 7 in Cobra Commander's armor, and Fred's just kind of staring at us. I don't know. It's a very static cover. It's certainly not rendered poorly. It's just, I don't know why. It just sits there. It lays there on the page for me. I think maybe if you get this same cover and you're able to do it where and obviously it wouldn't work here, but the Cobra Commander face is shown, so we can see more of what's going on. Because right now his eyes look just focused and intent. I kind of can't see as much of what's he doing, because he's staring right into us, which is fun. But I can't really read what's going on. And maybe that's what they're going for, because that's certainly Serpentor and Baroness aren't supposed to be able to read, who he is even. But yeah, so that's always been my thought on this cover. It's never really stood out for me as like a standout cover too. And I wonder if the background color being, it's like dark purple, which meshes with the blue on Cobra Commander, and even the grunt box up top that has, the G.I. Joe, the grunt figure in the corner, that's also blue. Maybe it's just a little too much blue. Like, I don't know. I wonder if maybe like just a bright something else color. But then that might contrast with Serpentor, because it does make Serpentor pop. But then that's only on the one side of the page. And with Baroness's hair also being blue and black, there's something. Yeah, there's just something about this. I don't know. And normally Mike Zeck's been doing these covers too. Also, Mike Zeck is doing a big month with Spider-Man. So I'm assuming that he's not doing this cover because his workload is focusing on those Spider-Man books, which rightfully so. So possibly, throw this out there, Maybe this was a little bit of a last minute cover. Maybe they were like, oh, shoot, Ron, we need a cover from you. And this is what we got. It's pure conjecture. But if you look at what else was being published and Zek's workload, it kind of makes sense. Because remember, they were still doing covers that actually related to the contents of the book, which I think is vital and crucial and needed for comic books. And they don't do that anymore.
Yo, Joe!
All right, get off my lawn. It's called Maneuvering for Position. Larry Hama, script. Ron Wagner. Awesome pencils. This next one, I'm very excited. I was real excited to see this. I wasn't expecting it. Inks by Russ Heath, the legend Russ Heath. Coloring by Neil Yomtov. Lettering by Joe Rosen. Editor is Bob Harris, and in chief is Jim Shooter. We talked about this, 40 some issues ago when Russ Heath illustrated that one issue in the 20s of G.I. Joe. And Russ Heath is a legend, known for his military stuff. His attention to detail is just staggeringly phenomenal. And even on a toy line, Russ Heath wasn't into G.I. Joe toys, but this was a job where he's like, oh no, here's the toys you need to ink, and between him and Wagner, everything in this issue looks awesome and tight and great and really nice inking, great layouts, great pencil work. Like this is a good looking book, and that's all Ron Wagner and Russ Heath. Sadly, Russ died a couple years ago. I know he was living out here in California, and actually a friend of the show, Jesse Campbell, used to help him out and used to, like help him around, help him, get to places. Cause Jesse's a great guy and is a big fan of Russ and old school comics and stuff, comic artists, not comics, although he might like old comedians. I don't know. So it's, and I know that Jesse was good friends with Russ. He used to help him get around places. So, big respect for Russ Heath, guys. If you're not familiar with his work, do a little research, because you're going to find some amazing stuff. So we open with, a couple, Mambas kind of bearing down on, Captain Min's boat, warning them Min's refusing to answer radio calls and everything. We got missiles firing. I mean, it's a really cool perspective. It's a nice little tutorial in perspective. You can just see the vanishing point. You can see all these action lines, and it just takes your eye from anywhere on the page and it focuses you on that boat. It's really good.
Yo, Joe!
And look at the face on Min. He's awesome. He's character. He's screaming. It's awesome. Throughout this entire issue, the level of detail, the inking, everything looks great. And I think for my money, this is the kind of detail work. This is the kind of art style that I think G.I. Joe works best in. You can certainly experiment with flashier styles or newer styles or more cartoony styles or whatever. But for me, this type of realism in the inking and the shading and shadows and lots of spotted blacks, that works best for G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe always needs to have a foot in the real world. When it gets a little too cartoony, not to pick on them, but the most recent example is, the McFarlane stuff. When it gets a little bit into that flashy image, new style that was burgeoning at the time, I don't like it. I don't think it works for G.I. Joe. I think there's a sweet spot for G.I. Joe that a real American hero always hit. So this is just another example. So Min's screaming. Fred 7 is now he's put on the Cobra Commander armor and that he designed. Min's calling him crazy. Fred gets in the pogo and he leaps off the boat as it explodes. I said last issue I thought Min lived. I do think he lives. I think he shows up, and I might be wrong, guys. Feel free to spoil it for me, but we'll get there. I swear to you, I thought Min shows up at some point down the road. But as far as I can tell right now, goodbye, Captain Min.
Yo, Joe!
And the pogo has launched. Now, I'll say this, though. Over water, I don't know what the pogo is jumping off of. Once it gets off that boat, that first jump, exactly know how it's zooming around, because I thought the whole idea of the pogo was like afterburners, or it's like a retro rocket to stop it from crashing, and then it pogos back up in the air, to constantly bounce around. How that's bouncing around over and over open ocean, which is absolutely where they're still at, I don't understand it, but that's okay. He manages to get the jump on one of those Mambas. Now, this is really cool. This panel in the middle where it's the pilot looking over his shoulder. Now, I want to say we covered the whole Russ Heath, Roy Lichtenstein theft in our last issue. I'm pretty sure we talked about it. But if you're not familiar, Roy Lichtenstein, who made millions and millions and millions of dollars by pop arting actual real artists' comic books, he stole from Russ Heath a lot. And one of the ones that he did, and I just found it, is what I think this panel's referencing. Is a pilot who's in the foreground, and he's screaming something, and in the back, right over his shoulder, you see the oncoming the enemy coming, approaching him from behind, and it looks like it's called OK Hot Shot. Okay, that's what Lichtenstein named it, but I believe that's stolen from a Russ Heath drawing. And I believe that's what they're doing in this picture. So if that was intentional, I love it, because it's a great panel. Google it, guys. Check it out. You'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see the reference. You'll see the similarities there. And then please keep Googling the Lichtenstein Heath stuff. It's really disgusting, and it's really, really unfortunate. Heath did a couple. He did an actual comic book about it, where he kind of, had his say about it, but it's really unfortunate, because his images just made a lot of people a lot of money. And I know that's the story of comics, but his is really like in full view of the world. He got ripped off. Check that out. We're not going to go into more detail now. We're talking G.I. Joe, but check it out, and then come back to this book. Or no, finish this, then go back to it, then find it out, and then appreciate these panels, because these are great panels that we're getting in a G.I. Joe comic of like aerial war action. And the Pogo manages to knock one of those Mambas out.
Yo, Joe!
Now, they're getting closer to the mainland, which again, I go, how was the Pogo jumping in the first place? But they're closer to the mainland, so Cobra can actually, Cobra Island mainland, actually. So they can, some asps, look like the asps, can track on them and shoot. But they're like, they're too close. The two planes are too close. Serpentor does not care. He says, shoot them both down. And he proceeds to shoot down his own Mamba, and he doesn't hit the Pogo. Now remember, they don't know what the Pogo is. The Pogo was built and designed by Fred, just like he built and designed the armor. It has Cobra symbols on it, but they have no idea who this person is. There's a bit in here of detail that I love, especially because it's drawn by Ron Wagner and Russ Heath, two artists who I don't think were. I mean, this had to be put in the notes. Like, they wouldn't have known. I don't think this would have been on their radar to include. So this had to be in Larry's notes. The tanker, that later on, everyone gets trapped in and dies when Cobra Island eventually blows up. But that was also on the island that carried the bombs. You guys know the tanker that I'm talking about. It's in this picture, which is great, because it's like a nice little landmark reminder that, Cobra Island is all centered around this giant decrepit tanker that was on the bottom of the ocean that eventually got risen up when Cobra Island was surfaced from all the nuclear weapons. Or TNT, rather, not nuclear weapons. But the detail on Serpentor in these pages is fabulous. This fourth panel, that's such a Russ Heath. This middle panel, the middle panel on the right with the womp and the whoosh, that's absolute Russ Heath. Like war. I love it. I absolutely love it. And it makes me think, if Ron Wagner drew that, it makes me think he was referencing Heath's, knowing that Heath was going to ink it. He was referencing Heath's war stuff to get this type of angles, because these are the kind of angles that Heath used to put into his war books. And I love it. I think it's great collaboration. And just the level of detail and everything, man. Yeah, you got these asps. You got the asp in the background. A lesser artist, they would have just drawn this bottom panel. They would have just drawn the Cobra Soldier in the foreground asp, and they would have drawn Serpentor, and they would have just done a background. But they took the time to give us a secondary asp to kind of give some depth to the photo. I think it's great.
Yo, Joe!
So now the Pogo lands. There's a little bit of stillness. I love that panel and the selection of angles on it, because it's worm's eye view. We still have the engines are smoking from the Pogo. Everything's still sealed. The tanks have closed in. There's no more sound effects, so it's no one's moving. All the vehicles are still, and all we get is the loudspeaker. Slowly come out with your hands up, and of course, it ends with Fred saying that he's Cobra Commander.
Yo, Joe!
And what a great place to shift story. Again, that's the master of Larry Hama. You start with some slam bang action. You give us a little bit of misdirect, and then you end it with a cliffhanger, and it's a page turner cliffhanger too, which is always the most exciting because it's, oh my God, I need to get to the next page. And then you go to the next page and there's a pressure release because now you're still not on Cobra Island. Now you're back in Utah. So there's this, ooh, now we got to change gears. It's playing with the tempo really. And it's fabulous. So now we are at those Quonset huts. Can't technically call it the pit yet because technically we don't know what it is, guys. Spoiler. And we see that those Joes from issue 60 that we've seen that were kind of they were duped into thinking they were on a weird G.I. Joe team, which was a weird, crazy, odd subplot. Strangely went nowhere. But they're finally joining up with the real G.I. Joe team. So we're talking Falcon, Chuckles, Law and Order, Fast Draw, and now they've also added Psych Out and Backstop, who drives the Persuader, I think. These guys were also in some of the special mission stuff, which we will be doing. I am skipping them for now unless they're the crossover, because I believe I'm going to be doing them on the Patreon, guys. So, go on to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and check that out. But they're met by Crankcase, Crankcase drove them in on the Ostriker, and they go in this hut and they see Leatherneck, who's standing pretty much alone in this giant empty Quonset hut.
Yo, Joe!
And Leatherneck, being a stickler that he is, he's on Crankcase for letting these guys in without the proper clearance. So Crankcase is like, yeah, well, they're on the team, but the paperwork hasn't caught up to him, and Leatherneck's not letting it go. Like he's playing by the book, and this is fabulous characterization. They're Joe members, but they're not official Joe members. So you give one of the guys who, Leatherneck's perfect for it. If we know Leatherneck anything from the cartoon, he was this guy. It's really great. And I think it's rare that there was the kind of continuity between the cartoon and the comic book of personalities. I think it's easy to say like the Duke was Duke because that's your cookie cutter thing. But I'm talking about like these B level guys. Like I don't think Shipwreck showed half the sass in the comic book that he did on the cartoon. One, he's barely in the comic to begin with, but in these early days, he'd show up and he was an angry pirate, but then that was it, but on the cartoon, he was just fully formed, fleshed out guy because he was a lead a lot. In Leatherneck, and maybe it's because it's kind of an easy trope for that, Marine stickler for rules and regulations. Maybe that's an easy, I don't want to say easy, but maybe that's a really nice basic way to interpret that character. Either way, it works. I'm here for it. So he says they're not. I don't want to tell them about anything. So there's this mystery about what they're doing, the operation that they're up to, and then there's a giant rumble.
Yo, Joe!
And outside, it's too dark for Chuckles to see anything, but he's asking about it, and Leatherneck's like, I ain't telling you squat. And in walks two dudes in like basically space gear. Now we know that they are Payload and Hardtop, and they're the Defiant pilot. Let's see. So Payload's the shuttle pilot, and Hardtop was he was the crawler driver. So he drove the car that moved the Defiant. Notably, the comic has Payload drawn as African American. The toy, not so much. The toy he's kind of a redhead. Kind of a Caucasian-y looking redhead, but I'm here for it. I think it's awesome. Just pointing out that there's a weird difference. But here's what I like. I like that they don't go out of their way to name them. Like a lot of times, especially in G.I. Joe, because they have to name check everybody because they have to make sure that all the toys are identified, so kids would be like, I want that guy. In this scene, because they're a part of what's supposed to be a need to know thing, no one says like, hey Payload, hey hey Hardtop. Just there's two dudes, they walk in, we've never seen them before, the reader. They're not new to Leatherneck, but they're new to these dudes, so no one's going out of their way to introduce them, like, hey Chuckles, meet Leatherneck, meet blah blah blah, or meet Payload, etc. So it's good. And Leatherneck's just taking charge. Lots of great detail and acting with the camera here. That angle on Chuckles' eye is fabulous up top.
Yo, Joe!
Now, back on Cobra Island. Now it's just great ink work, lots of shadows. It's all taking place at night. They're still on the beach. Serpentor is not budging, And the Dreadnoks show up to scream like they want a cage match. That's how they want to find it. Because Serpentor doesn't believe that he's Cobra Commander. He's like, how do we know it's you? The Dreadnoks just want a cage match. They then, all the soldiers, all the Cobra Troopers fall in line and are like, yeah, let's fight. And you get a little bit of that Sage Zartan role, which he did have on the cartoon, and he absolutely has it in the comic of like, he's an outsider, so he can kind of observe what's going on and wryly comment on it. And he says, your troops, you let your troops get bored, and bored troops get bloodthirsty.
Yo, Joe!
So this is a real challenge to Serpentor's rule here. Because the prodigal son of Cobra Commander, quote unquote Cobra Commander, has returned. What's he going to do about it? Meanwhile, Baroness and Mindbender are returning. Now, this is after the events of Special Mission 7. And they're returning in one of those sweet Cobra choppers that they never made, that they should have. And at the end of this page, Zartan has a really great idea. The Baroness, she knows what Cobra Commander looks like under the hood. Let her decide. Which is an awesome pivot point to just launch a whole nother subplot. And Larry does not miss a beat. Count on it.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, in Utah, Psych Out and Chuckles aren't going to stand for it. Now, Chuckles is really the instigator here. Chuckles, he knows he got screwed over by that fake G.I. Joe team thing that they were doing in 60, which again is weird. But whether or not that's weird, what I like is Larry didn't just drop it and ignore it. He made that a part of Chuckles' motivation here, because he made it a part of, like, that puts Chuckles on this, like, I don't trust anybody thing. And he's the spy. He's the infiltrator. He's the undercover guy. So that makes sense that he'd always be wary of everybody, because he's always lying to everybody. He fills in Psych Out, like, because remember, Psych Out wasn't there for that. So he fills him in like, hey, man, I don't trust anything. You and me, let's go check this out. So they put on their boots, grab some flashlights. Ink work on this page, phenomenal. You're getting, it's heavy. Like, the page is really, really black, and yet you're able to distinguish everything, like the accents of all the, it's not action, but all the events that are taking place on this. Everything's rendered really clear. Great light sources, illuminating all the right places, leaving all the right shadows. Really, really great work. Especially like that last panel with the flashlights. I love it when a flashlight doesn't show the full flashlight. It shows the light in their hand, and then it shows where it's illuminating on the ground. There's no like beam of light cutting through the air. I think that's always really cool.
Yo, Joe!
So they find these giant treads, and they're huge tracks, like tire tracks. They're huge tread tracks, and they're separated by like 50 feet, 50 yards? Yeah, 50 feet, which means it's a giant vehicle. And where could it go? It goes somewhere that just stops, just completely like an abrupt stop. Where did this giant vehicle go? And that's what caused the rumble earlier. So it's a mystery for us. It's a mystery for them. Now for us, here's what's neat about the way they kind of rolled this out. I think we all could kind of guess that they were working on a new pit early on, right? It's not a huge, like, gonna be a surprise. But what they're still doing, and they're still holding away from the reader, is now what's this giant machinery? Like, there's more than just this, okay, they're building a base under the ground, and we don't yet know what that looks like and how they're going to access it, so that's going to be a fun revelation when it does. But now they've introduced this giant, massive something, and that's fun. That's so far, I mean, outside of the dudes that do look like they're in spacesuits, beyond that, I don't, unless you were paying close attention to I guess if you were paying attention to the toy line, you would have known that those two were the pilots for the Defiant. But if you weren't, you don't really know what that is. So that's cool. That's a nice way to kind of drag out a mystery for another issue.
Yo, Joe!
So now we jumped to Marseille, France, which is we haven't been here before. And we also go back in time to like an old swarthy like 1940s adventure movie, which I'm here for it, man. It's Snake Eyes and Scarlet and the Blind Master. They're getting off a boat. So they took a steamer. They took like a boat cruise from Granada all the way to Europe. That had to take forever. I'm just saying. I can't see that being quick passage. But they had to get in unseen. So over to Europe unseen. So this is how they chose to do it, from Granada to Marseille. And as they did it, there were these swarthy dudes straight out of, again, an old 40s adventure. It's like these guys, one of them's like almost dressed like Balak from Raiders Lost Ark. They're straight out of Casablanca, and then they target these three as marks. They're going to steal them. You know, they figure they're smuggling something into the country, drugs or diamonds or money or something like that. And so they think that they're easy marks. So that's what they do. So Snake is, and this is cool too, because Larry's setting up Snakes and Scarlet and Blind Master. They're obviously they're going to rescue Stalker and those guys, but instead of just putting them there, you know, or sending them on an infiltration thing, he's putting roadblocks in their way. And even if it's normal roadblocks, in this case, normal being your everyday thugs, you know, French thugs, which is awesome. But you know, it's not overly complicating it with more Cobra shenanigans or things like that. It's just life. Life is getting in the way, and this is the adventure that they're going to go on.
Yo, Joe!
And they get in a taxi cab, and we see that they're followed by these thugs in a couple cars, and they've all got guns and Uzis and things like that. Also, everyone's wearing sunglasses, and Blind Master also in sunglasses. Snake Eyes also in sunglasses. Scarlet, the only one without sunglasses. The Blind Master's Valis has a ball-peen hammer, which we know he loves, and grenades and Uzis and all that stuff. And maybe that's why they had to take the boat, because they couldn't get any of that on any airplanes. So he's going to take care of business.
Yo, Joe!
I mean, even the taxi cab looks like it's straight out of the 1940s, which is fabulous. So the cab is beset upon by these two cars, and they pull their guns, and, you know, everyone's ducking because, you know, even none of them are bulletproof. But the Blind Master just straight up jumps out of the car, hits one of the windows with a ball-peen hammer, and throws a grenade in there with a 5-second fuse. Meanwhile, he's yelling at them. And the cab takes off. He crashes the cars together. So single-handedly, he physically takes out the two pursuing cars.
Yo, Joe!
They both crash to like an apple cart again, straight out of the classic movies. And the bad guys are they're determined to kill the Blind Master. And this is just great timing. These 2 pages, you get the setup, you know, and this is the old like Hitchcock showing you a gun, so you have to fire it, kind of, or a bomb under the table, so you have to fire it, right? Chekhov's gun and Hitchcock's bomb under the table. Blind Master introduces the grenade. He tells us it's a 5-second timer. That 5 seconds then sets the pace for the rest of his adventure here. So he's counting down 5, 4, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and as he gets to 5, the explosion happens. Murdering, by the way. So we used to do a Snake Eyes kill count. Snake Eyes hasn't killed anyone in quite a while. Let's start up the Blind Master kill count, because he straight up murders those 3 dudes, which I'm fine with. They were terrible. But it's a nice explosion. Very, very army explosion. But it's cool. It's a nice countdown. And smartly, the countdown ends on the end of the page. Like, it's a great way to break a page, because now you also then narratively jump back into the taxi cab with Snake Eyes and Scarlet, which is going to carry us and propel us on in the story. Imagine that explosion being like mid-page, and then on the bottom panel jumping over to, you know, Snake Eyes and Scarlet and thing. It doesn't have the impact, doesn't have the push, you know. So just it's like a pacing tutorial for you guys.
Yo, Joe!
And here we are, Snake Eyes and Scarlet. You know, they're getting away, and you see deep in deep background how far they are from it, the smoke from the explosion. So they've gotten away from him. And by the end of the page, we see that Scarlet points out that he took his one-way ticket to Barovia with him. He expected, he kind of figured this was going to, in some way or another, was going to separate them. So they're able to continue on their rescue operation. And as Scarlet says, if anyone can get Stalker, Snowjob, and Quick Kick out of Barovia, it's the 3 of us. This is wonderful. What's also great about the way, so a lot of times when Larry breaks these stories up with that have like the 3 subplots in it, he'll do like page, and then he'll do another couple pages of the next subplot, then he'll circle back to it. What he's doing here is he's just taken an interlude in the middle of this book to completely fill us in on where these guys are at, just wrap it up, and then we're going to get back to the other 2 plots, which is, you know, what's going down in Utah, and what's primarily the A plot is what's going on Cobra Island.
Yo, Joe!
So now the Baroness, she's going to jump back in that the helicopter, and she's going to take a look at Fred. And if he ain't Cobra Commander, us Dreadnoks get to use your face for a hockey puck. That panel in the middle of those 2 staring at each other in silence is so good. It's so good because it's then mirrored on the next page, and you get to the drawing. We'll get to this, but the rendering of his expression is wonderful. But the silence in the middle of this page it sets the tone for the inside of the helicopter. Because outside the helicopter is all tension and all anger and, Cobra troops and guns and dreadnoughts screaming, fight, fight, fight. Now you're inside the helicopter. And even so much as to suggest with the checkerboard pattern that it's like somehow soundproof, because it's a helicopter. Helicopters are very noisy. So I'm assuming that there's some sound dampening going on. So that's also great. It's just this moment of respite in the middle of what's been a pretty hectic, chaotic day for Fred. I love that he's not even going to bluff it. He knows his gig is up. Like, that's it. He's not going to be able to lie to her. She knows, he knows. There's some fun like toy features also that goes on here, talking about the anti-tamper explosive device in the in the helmet, which is always a neat little detail to give people something else to kind of play with. And he says the game is up.
Yo, Joe!
And now this is that panel I was talking about. It mirrors the one on the other page. Complete silence. The whole time she's not said a word. And now she's just staring at his face. She has the exact same expression. And you see that his look it's really remorseful. And this is where a wonderful illustrator like Wagner and Heath, they can tell a story with a look on a character's face. It's a real skill, and it's a real skill to do it in a realistic way. You could do it in a cartoony way. That's, I think I'll use the word easier, but I'm not saying it's easy, but it's, it's a little simpler when you can do like traditional cartoons and exaggerate eyes and, puppy dog eyes and sadness and big frowny mouths. But to do it in this like heightened realism way of making him look normal and human, but just in this case, he doesn't know what's about to happen, and he is nervous, and you see it all on this face. It's great. And the first thing she says is, "Who are you?" And then she listens to him, and she follows it with, she's listening intently because he says, he looked like, she said, looked. Why did you use the past tense? She's just listening, letting him tell his lies. What happened to him? How do you know what his face looked like? She's letting him tell her the story instead of her making assumptions. Because, one of the easy ways to lie is to let someone tell it for you. So when someone takes an assumption, like, did you do that? I bet you did. You did. You probably did this. Like, you killed Cobra Commander, didn't you? You want to, if you want them to believe that, then it's, yeah, I did, And so she's putting him in the position of crafting the lie or story or whatever it is. I don't think she trusts him is what I'm saying.
Yo, Joe!
And again, that panel recurs, that same camera angle. Great. And we see she's thought about it, and you get the universal sign for I'm thinking about it with her hand on her chin. Goes back to Rodin's Thinker. Great choice there. And she says, pull yourself together. We have an organization to run. She sees an opportunity. She doesn't believe him. She doesn't know what's going on. But what she sees is a way for her to get power through a proxy. And he's going to be her proxy. Put the helmet on. You're going to be Cobra Commander. And she doesn't even give him the chance to say yes or no, which is also fabulous. Opens the door. True Cobra Commander is back. And no one is laughing harder than Zartan. Absolutely great. Absolutely hilarious.
Yo, Joe!
And now we're back in Utah for a quick 2-page wrap up. It's Chuckles and Psych Out, and they're still outside, like confused, like what could possibly have made that thing? Those tracks are enormous. They see all the lights are on back in the hut, so they think they're going to be in trouble. Some good pacing here. You end the page with some tension of Chuckles about to open the door to probably get yelled at. You think he's going to be in trouble. He's got a smile on his face because this is character stuff, because we're seeing this is what Chuckles does best, like talk himself out of trouble. Like that's fun. I don't know why we ever hated Chuckles. Probably just the shirt, because Chuckles is pretty great.
Yo, Joe!
And inside, there's a party happening. And they don't understand what's happening, but it's every Joe. It's all kinds of, they're all dirty. So they all look like they've been working underground, quote unquote, Gung Ho, Shipwreck. Let's see, Flint, Lady J, although they're back from Granada. They don't really seem to care that Snake Eyes is dead. Looks like, who's that? Steeler, Rakondo, Wild Bill, Spirit, Robe, like everybody that they chose to draw, like a lot of dudes really going background. You got Frostbite, Dusty, And they're almost done. It's as Gung Ho says, a long night work, but we're almost finished. But we don't really know what they're finished with. And Psychot says, where did they all come from? We didn't see any vehicles pull up. And how come they're all grimy? Like they've been digging in the dirt. To be continued. Great little cliffhanger for us. And that's it, guys. G.I. Joe number 64. Man, that tension between Baroness and Fred, stop it. I don't think I appreciated those 3 pages as much that I did when I was a kid that I do today. Those 3 pages are masterful in showing power dynamics in acting and comic book acting, in pacing to keep you on the edge of your seat. What's going to happen? You see, she's silent. She lets him tell all the tales, and then she sees her moment and jumps in and takes control of the scene, of the momentum of his entire arc. Awesome. Absolutely a masterclass in storytelling. And Russ Heath and Ron Wag. I mean, if you don't appreciate the art on this, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, my brain breaks because it's absolutely gorgeous. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll see you next week for another episode of Joe on Joe. And now you Joe. And Joeing is half the battle.